I found that what I've enjoyed science the most is definitely due to the people I'm working with, not necessarily the project. Although I've been very lucky, I've been really interested in all the research I've gotten to work on so far. Um, so I'm going to tell you about how working in science and getting academic training to be able to do scientific research, what my experience has been so far. And there's a picture in the background of this um, introductory slide, this title slide that shows dopamine neurons. It's actually a picture of dopamine neurons from a really nice mouse brain slice that I worked on while I was in Texas, working in the same lab with Audrey. So um, I had there were some challenges because it's a difficult technique, but definitely it's really exciting when things go well. After community college, I actually transferred to Illinois State University, and I liked it so much there that I stayed there and earned my bachelor's degree. And I was lucky; I got an opportunity to do a paid summer internship in a research lab, and that's what got me hooked on doing research. It was in the lab of Dr. Paul Garris, and he studied psychostimulants like amphetamine, methamphetamine, cocaine, and their effects on the brain and dopamine release, which I just thought was really cool. And the work involved using rat models to do these experiments. And I never worked with or really been around rodents that much in the past, so I didn't realize I'd like it so much, but it was really cool. And rats are actually, at least lab rats, are really cute. The master's research was the most difficult thing I had done in my life so far at that point, academically. But I still really, really love science, so that's when I decided to go to Texas. And then after I graduated, or right before I graduated, I got a job. And immediately after I graduated, I moved from Texas to West Virginia. And I ended up where I'm at now, which is in California. So I moved cross country um, for the first time in my life by myself in 2020 during a pandemic, which was a big challenge and a little scary because I'd only moved cross country in the past when I was a kid with my family and my parents taking all the responsibility. And postdoctoral position just means that I earned a PhD and now I'm getting further training. I can learn more techniques and hopefully get some more training. At least that's my goal to try to learn how to manage a lab and maybe be the head of a lab one day, and improve my skills that I started developing in graduate school, like writing papers, communicating about science, um, learning how to get good at writing grants to get money for science because it's really expensive. And this picture at the bottom right of the merman is King Triton, which is the mascot for UCSD, which I was really excited about because I like that kind of stuff. Um, just as a side note. And then, yeah, so far my plans are to one day be the head of a lab or principal investigator. In the middle is a little schematic I made of conditioned place preference paradigm. So another cool thing I got to do is I got to work more hands-on with some mice and some behavioral experiments. So we take the mice and we can put them in these chambers, and before they go into either a chamber on the left side of this apparatus or the right side, they'll get either an injection of a drug treatment, which could be morphine or nicotine, or they'll get an injection of saline, which is like a control. And then after 8 days of conditioning, we put them back without any treatment and put them into the chamber's little entry chamber, and then the mice can freely roam wherever they want between the chambers. And we can use this test to figure out if a certain treatment is rewarding or aversive. If they spend more time in a chamber that they were put in after given a drug treatment like nicotine, then it's more likely that they find it rewarding. So I thought that was really cool and kind of fun to get to do some more behavioral experiments. Um, and then these pictures are from the current lab that I'm in. Shows some little brain slices on the left, and then a picture on the monitor of a brain region called the Central Amygdala. It's a region that's important in emotions like fear and anxiety. And there are emotions that become exacerbated or like increased during withdrawal from alcohol and also during withdrawal from other drugs too. Um, and then the picture on the far right shows an actual like brain cell that I'm patching with a recording pipette. Right, so I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm working on now. And my main project is focusing on alcohol use disorder. And alcohol use disorder is when a person will get dependent on alcohol. Um, and it happens in different stages. So initially there can be intoxication, someone gets drunk and they feel good or they like it or they have fun, and that can include binging. Binging is often something that becomes a big problem during young adult years, in undergraduate or like in your 20s. Um, it's not good, and the more binging that is done can often increase chances of becoming dependent on alcohol. So try to be aware of that, please. Um, and also, there's negative effects after intoxication, especially after binge drinking, which is drinking a lot of alcohol in a short period of time. I forgot to define that. Afterwards, typically the next day, and you might have heard about this from older people, or if you have older siblings or relatives, that there can be a lot of negative effects. That's the withdrawal period, and that's where the amygdala is really important because people can become like really grouchy, often dehydrated. Um, they just feel really, really bad, really sick, and tired, and it's not good. And this withdrawal part of this cycle becomes even more important when someone's dependent on alcohol because it can become so extreme that they'll feel like they want to drink more alcohol in order to reduce some of the withdrawal effects. And then it becomes a problem where they drink to feel good, and then they eventually just keep drinking alcohol to not feel terrible from the withdrawal. Um, and then there's the also preoccupation anticipation stage where you can see like a lot of different brain areas, especially like the cortex that's important for thinking and planning ahead, executive function, like problem solving, becomes kind of really hyper focused on drinking, getting the next drink, and seeking and consuming alcohol. So I think this is alcohol use disorder is a really important problem. It affects lots of people, and people even who don't drink are affected because it's increases the chance of drunk driving, healthcare costs from people being sick and needing treatment to try to reduce their alcohol use, liver issues, tons of problems can happen. And also, I'm like kind of personally interested in alcohol use disorder too because there's uh, a lot of it in my own family. So that kind of makes me feel a little personally invested that I'd like to understand this better. And if there's a way I can help even a tiny bit to uh, maybe try to help people who want to quit or want to stop being dependent on alcohol to stop being dependent, then hopefully I can contribute some information to help with that eventually. But just within the lab that I'm in, there are lots of different positions for scientists. So if you think you're interested in doing scientific research, there are options. And this is just in academia and examples from the lab that I'm currently in. There's lots of different types of scientists, so this isn't exhaustive, but there's lab volunteers, there's lab interns, and they can do similar work. Um, and you get to learn about science and how scientists set up experiments, and you can do things like work with animals. So it can be pretty cool. Lab technicians, they're also really good, help with the support team, and often have like more specialized skills than people who are just starting in a lab. Graduate students, such as working on master's or doctoral degrees, often do research when they're in science or the STEM field. Postdoctoral scientist. That's what I'm doing right now. um, so I've had more experience and training than um, a lot of the other scientists I've listed so far, and still learning more. Adjunct professors, which may not necessarily like run their own lab, but they teach and do a lot of other things that the heads of labs often do too. So a lot more work. Um, and then principal investigators, or PI, we often call them. And they're the ones who are the head of the lab, and they kind of run things, and they're responsible for making sure there's enough money to pay for all the science, um, and that everyone gets training and that things work well. So even just in the lab I'm in, there's lots of different options, and chances to learn about how science works in real life. So if you think you might be interested in scientific research, but you're not sure, ways to figure that out are trying to do some more STEM courses, so it's science, technology, engineering, and math, um, and just online courses. There's a lot of free ones, classes at school, just reading in general. There's volunteer experience, so if you have time and the ability to get like physically to a lab, um, and you don't, you can afford, like, you don't have to work for money, you have a little time you can work for free, and often there's a lot of positions open for that. So you don't get money, but you do get some experience and you get to check it out, which is neat. There are some paid internships if you look for opportunities and like talk with like science faculty often. They might be more aware of those opportunities. Informational interviews. So if you know of a job that you're interested in, and I think this is true even for outside of science, you can ask someone who's doing a job that you think you might want to do in the future. Ask them if they have time to meet for like a short, maybe like half hour interview, um, on Zoom or in person if it's safe or whatever, and just ask them a bunch of questions about like how did they get there, what kind of skills and training do you need to do that job, what actually is the job like in real life, because it's often not the same as what we see on TV and in movies. And then, especially if you go into like the a STEM field, graduate school with a research component can be really interesting and rewarding. Kind of things that I like to think are have helped me is just kind of follow your interests. Whatever you're interested in, you're curious about, try to learn more about it. See if there's a way it can become like something, something you'll enjoy in the future. In general, in life, and especially in science, confusion, making mistakes, failing is totally normal. It's often an everyday thing, but it really helps you learn, and it's important, and it's inevitable. So it's good to at least attempt to embrace it and learn from mistakes. To try out different opportunities, apply for jobs, volunteering, anything. What if you get into science, funding, awards, even if you don't think that you're qualified for something, maybe you are. Give yourself a chance and try to check some things out and get some experience in whatever you're interested in. Um, Being curious and creative is not just for detectives and like artists. It's really good in science, and without it, science is terrible, and it's your research won't be as good, especially like troubleshooting, problem solving, coming up with experimental designs and projects you want to work with. I think it's a really creative experience. But just because you get a bad grade in a certain class, or you get a poor SAT score or something, that doesn't limit what your potential is. Only like what only the limits you set on yourself, and like other ones that you can't control are the limits. But so grades and standardized tests, do the best you can, but don't feel defeated if you don't have like a perfect GPA. And also just have fun, find something that you enjoy and that you find value in. And I think that's something that I really get from doing scientific research, is that even though it can be very difficult, there's a lot of fun, cool things that I've learned and discovered and gotten to see and do that I wouldn't have had the opportunity in any other career path. So I really like it, and I hope that you can all find something that you really like too.